Ever since I was age 13, I was fascinated by what I'm now calling personal performance psychology. That is, you are what you think you are, kind of thing. And time went on, and I read all the books and did the affirmations and all of this. But in the early 1990s, I ran across this concept that you could take care of even the most severe emotional issues, not with weeks and months and years of talking about it in standard therapy sessions, but rather involving the Chinese meridian system. It was like a new use, for the acupuncture meridians. And we found that if we would just tap with our fingertips, on various places that the acupuncturist might put needles, while thinking about an emotional issue that bothered us, magic happened. I mean, we found we could do in minutes or hours what standard conventional therapy would take weeks, months, or years. And that just got my attention. I don't have a formal background in psychotherapy. I'm an engineer. I'm a Stanford-trained engineer. But I found this just fascinating, how these things could just melt, right before our eyes. And so I put this together. I put some films together. I wanted to bring this out to the public in a way that anybody could do it. Engineers like simplify things, and so that's what I did. We have one simple system that we use that applies to even the most intensive issues, including the PTSD problem that our veterans face. One of the features of an engineer like myself is we become very curious. And while I wasn't really a psychotherapist by training, I knew people who'd gone through psychotherapy, and I had talked to some therapists, and over time, just about their profession, I'm just interested in it. And I kept wondering, why does it take so long and so many sessions and so much money to take care of these issues? I mean, to me as an engineer, that means you're not really pointing to the right cause. You're dancing around the issue somehow. I didn't have an answer for that, but that appeared to me. But then when I saw that you could combine the acupuncture meridians, which is sort of a thinking outside the box thought, with it, and you could collapse this process down into something very small and very contained and very effective, that really got my attention. And I was curious, to even go beyond that. How can we refine that process even more and more and more? And one of the things we found is that as we were taking care of emotional issues doing this, pointing to what I think is the real cause, that is a disruption in the body's energy system, something never thought about before this, this idea came around. Medicine points to causes that I don't call a cause, okay? That an engineer wouldn't call a cause, okay? I mean, they will point to something. They'll say, well, the reason you have depression is because there's a chemical imbalance in your system, okay? And I'd look at that and say, that's not a cause. That chemical imbalance is yet another symptom. I want to know what causes that chemical imbalance. I want to know what's the real underlying cause is. Now, I may not have every answer there is, but with all my experience, we have seen mountains of headaches go away, and arthritis go away, and physical symptoms go away by addressing emotional issues. People carry around their anger and their resentments and their guilts and their traumas and this kind of thing in an unresolved way. And that causes imbalance, and the emotional imbalances, which any doctor will tell you is also coincident with chemical imbalances. So why not go to the emotional cause and solve all the rest of the symptoms? And while we're not perfect at this, we've got a track record on that would just blow you away. Well, what was curious to me is that somebody like a veteran could have this very strong emotional impact on them from something that only took moments to occur. I mean, they're in a foxhole and a grenade shows up and boom, and everything goes off. And they have a lifelong problem with that. They have nightmares and flashbacks and things like that. But yet the problem only occurred in an instant. Why would it take in conventional therapy, this was just my engineer's thinking, months, years to do what amounts to very little for it? And why do you have to cover it over with drugs for something that was installed momentarily? We're somehow or other looking at we're looking down the wrong tunnel for this. And so when I came across the idea of involving the energy meridians, I thought, geez, how much suffering can you now relieve with a simple little process? As an engineer, it just seemed to me the therapy process was pointing themselves at symptoms. People, veterans, for example, couldn't sleep at night. They would have flashbacks. They would have uncontrollable emotions. These are like symptoms. I'm curious about what causes that. And we can talk about symptoms all day long, but what really causes that? And I got to thinking about that, and that's why we came up with the blending of the acupuncture meridians with the therapy process, because to me, we want to look at a new cause. This is outside the box thinking, but that new cause would be this energy system that threads throughout all of our bodies, gets disrupted somehow, like a short circuit in a radio where all you hear is static, like that, And if we could somehow balance that disruption out by tapping on the endpoints of these various meridians, with our EFT process, we could balance that out. And we're pointing now to what I think is the cause of it. It's just this disruption, this static that's going on in the system. And that turned out to be true. We would do this even with newcomers. I was a newcomer. I'm not a therapist, and I would start tapping on people's meridians, and magic would happen. Somebody who was afraid of heights wouldn't be afraid anymore. Somebody who had nightmares every night, they either wouldn't have them or they would be really quite mild. And then we started finding that, maybe these emotional issues are the cause of a lot of physical symptoms. The same kind of thing that doctors tend to want to cover over with the various drugs. We found that if we can take care of emotional causes, the things that show up physically in people, that people will get out of their wheelchairs. We've had many people do that. We've had people get over terminal diseases that doctors told them there's no way around it. Your days are limited. But we have a lot of cases like this where we get to emotional causes and physical magic happens. Well, as an engineer by background, I'm always looking for scientific proof. We're just sort of built that way, and that's how we're trained. So it's one thing for us to apply EFT to all these veterans and people with these issues and watch with our own eyes what happens. That's very persuasive all by itself. But the scientific community is only partially persuaded by that. The scientific community wants proof. They want things that are documented. And so we've done a lot of studies on this that are published in peer-reviewed journals. We've seen physical changes in our veterans and in other people. We've seen cortisol drops. Cortisol is a chemical that measures stress release. I remember back when I first started this, mid-90s, and we took EFT into the Veterans Center in Los Angeles. And we were just doing remarkable things there. These veterans were bringing in their wives, their brothers, employees at the VA, and so on, because we were just knocking these things down right and left, where the drugs and standard therapy wasn't happening, for them. And I thought, well, how obvious. All we need to do is get therapists and doctors, et cetera, to just watch, and it's right before your eyes, and the guys are jumping up and down about it, and they're not having their nightmares or their intrusive thoughts and their flashbacks. And it's obvious. It's right in front of you. Well, that wasn't persuasive to the scientific community. They want hard data. They want scientific proof, okay? Well, I'm an engineer. I sort of knew that anyway, but to me the other avenue of proof was so stunningly obvious, in a way, who needs science? But over the years, in order to satisfy the scientific curiosity, we've done a number of studies that have appeared in peer-reviewed journals. We've had a lot of scientific questionnaires that have been, approved by science, that these veterans have taken before and after their EFT. And we found and measured, a drops in physical items like cortisol. It's a chemical in the body that has to do with your stress response, and the lower it is, the better. And we find dramatic changes in that. All of this is now put forward in the scientific realm, so that we're satisfying not only the obviousness of just watching what happens, we've now got it documented that nobody can argue with. When I first started doing this in the mid-90s, I had no idea how big it was going to get. I had no idea that it'd be worldwide and there'd be tens of thousands of people using it, and at the moment, well over 1 million people have experienced EFT. Not just veterans, but people from all walks with all kinds of problems, physical, emotional, and so on. And I'm gratified to see that it's taken off, so well. It's well beyond my ability to manage at this point. I mean, it would take a staff fill the whole building, I think, to be able to manage everything that's going on. But it's really heartwarming to see how therapists, people in the medical community, nurses, doctors, and the like have embraced it. They're using it in all their various facilities. We've got people in Indonesia that just on their own are taking it to thousands of people that are disadvantaged with PTSD because of some of the catastrophes that have happened, tsunamis and this kind of thing in that part of the world. We've got people using it all over Europe. We've got people using it all over South America and just about every country that you can imagine now. And the beautiful thing about it is that they just picked it up from our website. They picked it up from our free manual and the DVDs that we have, and they've passed it on by word of mouth. What's interesting about the way all this has proliferated is that I've never advertised it. I've made it available. I've made the basics available for free, just in a manual, and our DVDs that teach the process are low cost. I've let people give workshops without paying me any royalties or things like that. I kind of wanted it to have this open hand, because it was too valuable to the world, if the world wanted it, to do anything else with it. I didn't want to put tall fences around it, financial fences and things like that, and lots of rules and everything else. So I've put it out in a way that anybody can use. We have 10-year-olds that use this effectively. Okay, and it has galloped. It has started on its own in kind of a mild way and gradually gained momentum, and now it's galloping. I mean, people are asking me to do our DVDs in all kinds of different languages, and the beautiful part about it is I don't have to do all these things because people are doing them on their own. Our EFT manual, for example, and this is really a heart tug, has been translated over 20 times into different languages. Nobody's paid anybody anything to do it. They just did it. They wanted their countrymen in France and Germany and various dialects in India and in the Netherlands and Japanese and all these languages. People took a 79-page manual and spent weeks and months meticulously translating every word of it and then putting it on their website for free so their countrymen can use it. Now that's really heartwarming. That's really dedication, to this process, and it's one of the things that makes me so glad that I started it, because it isn't just me trying to pound the table for, come on folks, let's do this. It's everybody else picking it up and sharing it. Excuse me. One of the natural unfoldments here is that other people have become very good at EFT. They've become very proficient. They are very expert. They are masterful at it, and they develop their own products. They've developed their own ways of going about this, which I have encouraged from the beginning. I didn't want everybody to think that I had every answer that there was. So as a result of that, people can bring it into their own style. They can be better with it still. And it's, as a result of that, it's getting into every nook and cranny of the healing field that you can imagine. And one of the things I would really love to see, and it's kind of going that direction now, is that someday the medical profession will take a look at this and they will say, this can be so powerful, to help my patient with their headaches or their pains or this disease or that disease. Maybe there's an emotional cause that I didn't really learn about in medical school. And maybe if I apply EFT skillfully or refer a patient to someone who can apply it skillfully, we can take care of that problem before we have to invade the body with surgeries and drugs and radiations and things like that, And I would love to see EFT be a frontline method, to help people with their healing. Let's take care of the angers and the guilts and the stuff that already causes your ulcer, for example, and the stress at work that causes these various ailments you may have. Intuitively, we already know that. But now we have a tool that you can even learn yourself, that can have a major impact, on the healing profession. I don't have any way of proving this, but I once estimated that if EFT was skillfully applied to every single patient from a medical point of view before the drugs and surgeries and radiations were given, that we would reduce the cost of medical care in the U.S. alone by 80%. Now, taking all this over to our PTSD problem with our veterans. These guys are suffering unnecessarily. We've been able to put such a huge dent in that problem that this is my view now, but I think it's bordering on criminal not to bring this to their attention. There's so many people that can do it now, and all we have to do is have the open door. Just give us the door. We'll walk in. We'll do it. I really wait for that day. It was very disappointing to me to apply this to veterans and to have other EFTers apply it to veterans so successfully, and then to go to the VA and go to the various vet centers and have the veterans themselves talk about it and so on, and get this sort of bureaucratic straight arm. Well, it doesn't comply with our rules. It doesn't fit in this box. That's how bureaucracies are. It's not a criticism of any one person. It's just how bureaucracies unfold, And so that's been very disappointing. And even today, with all the research we have, verifying what we're doing, it's still difficult to fit in the box that the bureaucracy places in front of you. You've got to comply with this, or we can't use your method, okay? So we try to comply, and we get back, well, you haven't complied just the way we would like, so try again, and it's a stonewall kind of thing. So that's one reason we make this film, because we want to bring it to the public's attention. If the public gets behind it and says, there's something important here. Why do our veterans have to suffer unnecessarily? It's inexpensive. A lot of it can be done for free. Why don't you open the door? And that's my disappointment is the door hasn't been opened widely enough yet. But hopefully with the enthusiasm of others that are watching this film, and the VA themselves, and the people at the top of that bureaucracy, and the politicians, And the President of the United States will get behind this and say, folks, it's right here in front of us. The PTSD problem is probably the most severe form of emotional issue you can have. These guys can't sleep. In fact, many of them are even afraid to go to sleep because of the nightmares, you know. They have flashbacks. They have intrusive memories. They don't fit in society. Their marriages fall apart. They have nothing but problems that were created by the war. So what I wanted to do was take something so severe and apply EFT to it. The thought being that as we resolve these issues, the obvious conclusion is, if you can resolve those and do it so nicely and so cleanly and so well, what could you do with the everyday stresses that people have? You know, how might the corporate workplace be improved if people had less depression and less stress and less anxiety and less of the garden variety of emotional issues that we all face, you know? And so if we can take care of something that severe, then the less severe becomes obvious. It becomes a tool for everyday society. It becomes clear there. If I just started with, you know, somebody had a sprained ankle or a pain someplace and that went away, well, you don't necessarily say, well, that could, gee, look at what you might be able to do from that and go from the ground floor up. We want to go from the most difficult level, which is the PTSD with our veterans, resolve that, and then let people conclude that everything below it is a candidate for the same kind of result. Obviously, PTSD is not the only problem health-wise that this country faces. You know, there are addictions. There's the obesity problem. You know, there's rampant depression that lots of people have. There's all the medical uses, you know, that a new way of looking at healing can address. You know, so it's one of my hopes that as people say, look at what you're doing with PTSD, that when we also want to say, hey, listen, we've got some medical uses here too, that people will start paying attention. Really? You mean you can do with medical issues? You can address medical issues in a similar way and get similar results? Well, we certainly have a lot of experience with that, you know. And what about the whole prison system? You know? And why is it these people go into prison and they're there and they just don't seem to get any better, even though our prison system is supposed to be rehabilitation? It really isn't, because nobody goes into the prison system and really tries. They don't know how to rehabilitate. But I've been in the prison system many times, and I've taken some of the most difficult cases, you know, guys that are pathologically criminally oriented, and we've taken care of a lot of their emotional issues, and they have a completely different demeanor in prison. They become, instead of a difficult prisoner, they tend more towards model prisoners. They're taking care of themselves. They're doing outside schooling, you know, while they're in the prison. They're not the problems they used to be, you know. And there's the whole school system. I mean, how many children go to school and don't even like being there? Okay, how many of them have learning disabilities that nobody really knows how to take care of? I can't tell you how many cases of dyslexia that I and others have taken care of. And dyslexia, I mean, just think about it. People with dyslexia just can't read well. They've got to read the same thing over and over and over again. Big handicap for someone. It affects their entire life. We can take care of that oftentimes quickly. Sometimes one session and it's all done. That changes a child's life dramatically. There's behavior issues in school. There's abuse at home that shows up in school. And all of this can be addressed very effectively with EFT. I started doing this in the mid-90s, having no idea, how large it was going to get and how well accepted it would be throughout the world and how prolific people would be with it and so on. But it's never been a business. I mean, I've never set up a business model to see, well, how do we maximize profits or anything like that. It's been more of a, how can we get this word out, and there's only me. My daughter Tina does a superb job of handling a lot of the details behind the scenes. But aside from a few, volunteers who do things here and there, we've never had a big staff to do this. Our staff, if you will, has been the public. It's been the people who have used EFT. It's been the people who have, the therapists and the doctors who have used it themselves, for themselves, and then for their clients that are proliferating it, and it's just moving forward. And that's how it's done, EFT World Headquarters is right over there in my house, okay? It's my desk, and I've got a computer sitting there, and I talk to the world with it, and people ask me, well, is it okay if I do this with EFT? I'd like to take it over here to, this facility or this prison or this other activity. And they ask me, well, how might I do that? And so on. And so we talk about it, but they do it, There's no fees that we charge for them to do it. They do it. They charge whatever fees they want if they charge anything at all, And so it's never grown as a business. It's always been a grassroots kind of thing, And if it was a business, I've got to tell you, it's an interesting way to get a lot of free advertising, because I've never paid a nickel's worth of anything to anybody for any kind of advertising, formal advertising. EFT is like a big team to me. It's a big community. And there's lots of room for people to do different things that they want to do and all of that. But there's been a high degree of integrity with it. People like it. They like spreading it. They like the ambiance of it, the fact that anybody can learn the basics for free and that kind of thing. One of the nice things about the way this has unfolded is that it really doesn't need me anymore to take off and be effective in the world. In fact, it is so prolific at this point, if I wanted to stop it, I couldn't. It's not possible. Too many people have too much enthusiasm for it, to even think about stopping it. It's the snowball that's rolling down the mountain, and it's now large enough so that observers from our various institutions are starting to pay attention. The military, for example. That's what this film is about. The medical community is another one. The prisons, the schools, and on it goes. Okay, the corporations is another area. And so that's very gratifying that I can just sort of sit back. It's gratifying to me that EFT has been so very well accepted over time, that so many people are doing so many things with it, that I'm not even necessary anymore. I've had such an open hand with it, and there's such quality people out doing things with it, that it's just moving into areas that I couldn't do by myself. This team has taken off, so to speak. The community has got it's an entity all by itself. It's a movement by itself. And so I'm actually retiring, from it. I'm handing EFT over, to all those people that are that are doing such quality work with it, and it will. I mean, I couldn't stop it if I tried anyway. That's how much enthusiasm there's been for it. Now, when I say retire, I'm retiring from the administration and the day-to-day stuff of EFT. I still have a number of things that I'm trying to explore. I'll have a really rather simple website, that I'm going to put forward, and a simple newsletter and this kind of thing. But the day-to-day, I'm not necessary anymore. That's very gratifying to know that it will move. And if the founder isn't here, it'll still keep going, and that's what's happening. As a result of EFT's acceptance, we're finding new doors are opening, doors we didn't really expect to begin with opening. Remember, I'm an engineer. It's a very left brain kind of discipline that I come from. And even though we've done a lot of science on this and a lot of research, to convince the scientific community that what we're doing is real, there's parts of EFT that are just not explainable in conventional ways. For example, many times I have sat, right here in my home in California, and I've done EFT on myself in behalf of somebody thousands of miles away, in Israel, for example, and their issue would go away even though I'm tapping for them. They're not doing the tapping. I'm doing the tapping. We call that surrogate EFT, and it's not something that happens just once in a while. We have many people who have written in about the surrogate EFT. They've done it, they've tapped on themselves for their pets, they've tapped on themselves for infants, they've tapped on themselves for people with sore necks and sore backs and sore this and one thing and another, and for athletic performance. And these improvements happen even though the person themselves is not tapping. So, see, I can tap for you in the camera for an issue that you have, and you will get results. Now, see, that's not possible unless there's a spiritual piece to this. It's not possible unless, you and I are connected. It doesn't appear that we're connected, because here's my body here in California, and there's your body wherever you are. And so how can I do something on myself like EFT and you get a benefit unless we're connected? Now, if you go back through the thread of all the religions of the world, there's one thread that goes through many of them, and that is that we are all one. Certainly doesn't appear that way. But we couldn't, I can't do my EFT in your behalf and you get a benefit unless this oneness has, some merit. So that brings in a whole another area. See, we're letting God in our playpen. And it's an interesting concept because, you can do EFT without having any spiritual ambiance in it at all. See, we can do EFT without any spiritual connotation at all in it, and still get results. And we have 10-year-olds who know nothing about the possible spiritual aspect of it that will do EFT for their friends' dog phobias, and we have cases like that. And their friend will get better. We've had little young gymnasts who've done EFT to help their friends do gymnastics better, and it has worked, etc. But if you want to get down to the real spiritual aspects, the areas where this world peace can actually occur, this great big grandiose goal that we're worried about, why are we having wars upon wars upon wars, There's this spiritual connection that threads itself in and out of EFT in many ways that you'll see if you get involved with EFT in an intricate way. In the last several decades, a new area of science has emerged called quantum physics. And in quantum physics, what is being found is that we exist in a sea of infinite intelligence. It's a sea of energy. And we are basically energy packets. And we all come from the very same source. And all of these energy packets are connected. All the atoms in the world are connected. It may not seem like the atoms in my hand here are connected to the atoms in your knee, but indeed they all came from this same soup, if you will. And one of the things that quantum physics is finding is that they're finding God. And that's what all that is. It's an inescapable conclusion that everything is interconnected and we are all one, even though it doesn't appear that way. Okay? And so one of the things we find with EFT, particularly in the area of doing surrogate EFT, that is, I can tap on myself, I can do EFT for myself for your back pain, for example, and you will get a result even though you're not doing the tapping. That can't happen unless we're connected. And so we're seeing in EFT this spiritual component that quantum physics is finding independently of that. And that one of my favorite spiritual readings, of Course in Miracles, is talking about through yet another lens. And so, I mean, this whole thing of letting God in the playpen and putting God into the science equation is really becoming more and more important, and EFT is on the forefront of that. You can't ignore that when you do EFT surrogately. You can't ignore the fact that what you're doing when you're tapping here is you're tapping on the body's energy system. It's a sort of a model for this sea of energy, that we've sort of brought into one body. So we're not dealing with the chemistry of the body like medicine does. We're dealing with the energy of the body. And that opens brand new doors. I think spirit plays a much bigger part in true healing than does all the chemical approaches and everything else that some of our modern science wants to put forward. I think we need to bring God into the therapy room. We need to bring God into the operating room. We need to bring God into the medical schools. The spiritual aspect of this. Now, I can get disagreed with that, but the more you do EFT, the more you study quantum physics, the more you study A Course in Miracles and some of the other really important things that are emerging in this field, the more undeniable that is. One of the things I wanted to do when I gathered together people for this film, brought the veterans in, I wanted to bring some highly qualified, highly credentialed people, MDs, PhDs, and the like, to come in and observe, to participate, and to be part of this whole process. Because these are people that they can do anything they want. They don't have to use EFT. I mean, they have at their disposal all the healing methods, in the world, and they're qualified to use them. But they choose EFT as a front-running tool. And part of what we're demonstrating here is not only what this does to veterans and for veterans and their families. We're showing that highly qualified, practitioners are using this tool in a complementary way to medicine and standard psychotherapy and so on. And as a result of that complementary use, I mean, it is so powerful that those who start using it, including those that you've seen on this film, are using it more of a front runner, or as much as they're using it they're using it not only in a complementary way, but in many cases it's becoming their front-running tool, that they would blend with other techniques. The list of healing methods can go on and on endlessly. I mean, there's all of medicine, of course, but there's acupuncture, and there's Reiki, and there's massage therapy, and there's psychotherapy, and it goes on and on and on and on and on. And until recently, these things have sort of been in their own little box, I have a back thing, maybe I'll go to the doctor, but maybe I'll go to a chiropractor, for example. And we're finding more and more that the practitioners are leaning towards blending these things together, complementary techniques, if you will. And EFT, it has fit just beautifully, because I have seen people blend EFT with medicine. I've seen them blended with chiropractic, hypnotherapy, and anything else you can name. And in every single case, this complement, this blending, if you will, brings better results than any one of them used independently. I would like to see EFT develop as a friend to the healing community. I mean, EFT doesn't do everything in the world. I mean, my goodness, if somebody has an automobile accident and they've broken every bone in their body, well, we're not going to start doing tapping to mend their bones. Maybe it would work, but I've yet to see that. Okay, no, we have a highly qualified medical profession that can put this kind of thing back together. There's nothing else like it in the world. By the same token, there's nothing else like EFT in the world, and there's nothing else just like hypnotherapy in the world, and so on. And so I think what we need to do is to adopt EFT as a friend to all of these healing techniques. It's a complement. It's something that can enhance lots of things all by itself, but can be a blending tool that can enhance, at least in my experience, most everything it touches.